Do really well in your running, so I'm not going to dwell on that too much. Just basically posture looks good, arms look good, generally speaking very light, high cadence, very happy with all of those things. So again, I'm not going to dwell on what is going well, and I'm just going to try and stick to what we might want to look at to try and help with that posterior compartment, the pain in the sort of back aspect of the shin, the tib post and the soleus, we think pulling on the shin bone too hard. So a few things to look at. The first thing, obviously you've got a bit of a forefoot strike here, which I'm perfectly happy with most of the time. So I haven't quite got that angle on the right frame, but you can see your foot is angled down, about 21 degrees when you actually take the load through your foot. And that's really not a problem, and it's allowing you to land with a very light sort of footstep. So you're not landing with a very hard sort of thud, which is what we want, right? Now, that being said, it might be good under normal circumstances, but with this pain in the posterior muscle group there, the tib post and the soleus, let's say, we know that if you were coming down with your foot flat like that, so more of a midfoot sort of strike, then your tib post and your soleus are only going to start really working once the foot is down. And they're only going to be working pretty much concentrically. So from here, they'll do a little bit of eccentric work, and then they'll start concentrically pushing about here, which means they're shortening and to push you off. Now, what they're doing at the minute is they've got an extra little bit to do, because as your foot comes down, pointed downwards there, now they start to lower you down onto the ground gently, which is good normally, but that means they've got extra work to do. So what I'm wondering, if they are being overloaded and we're trying to think about reducing their demand a little bit, then we remove this little section here where they're lowering you down onto your heel, and we move you more to a sort of midfoot strike. So if I bring that up, this isn't obviously what you're doing, but if your foot was flatter, right, closer to parallel with the ground when you're coming down, more of a midfoot strike, less of a forefoot strike, that might potentially increase your impact a little bit, which might be bad, right? Or it might reduce the load on the tib post and the soleus a bit, which might be good. And we'd have to weigh those two up, because we can't remove forces. We can only change the duration during which they're being absorbed, or we can move them to different parts of the body. So if we do this, what we're probably going to do is increase the loading of the metatarsals and the other passive connective tissue type structures in the foot, and offload the tib post, the soleus a little bit. So we're sort of shifting the weight from one structure to another, or shifting the stress. That might be enough to give you some time to build up the capacity in the soleus and tib post so they can tolerate both ways of landing. So that's my first sort of hypothesis about something we should try. And then the other thing I wanted to sort of draw your attention to, if we come here, just at the point where you're at your lowest, and then we compare that to where you're at your highest, it comes across more when you watch it in real time. But it just looks like quite a lot of vertical displacement. So if we look at the amount you're moving up and down, we can see, to me, that looks like quite a bit. Now, it's difficult to quantify, and I'm not sure that there's any normative data out there on what is good versus what is bad. It's certainly nothing I've read. It'd be interesting if you wear like a Garmin watch or something, if we had some numbers for that. But I'm just wondering if we just reduce these lines so you were moving a little bit more forwards and a little bit less up and down, I think potentially that's going to reduce improve your efficiency, right? So if you imagine throwing a tennis ball as far as you can, you wouldn't throw it really high up in the air, right? And you wouldn't throw it completely flat. There's a sort of angle range where it's going to go the furthest for the amount of effort you put into it. So I think at the minute, you may be throwing a little bit high up in the air, so you're jumping up too high, and that also is going to make the job when you come back down a little bit harder. So we could reduce this vertical oscillation a little, I think. And if we couple that with switching to more of a sort of flatter foot when you land here, those two things should reduce the demand on the tib post and the soleus a little, and then we just have to see how well you cope with it, right? It's going to be less efficient for a time because you're not used to it, and it's potentially going to increase the loading on, I think, probably the fifth metatarsal, which is the outside toe bone on the outside of your foot. So we'd have to just see how it goes, but I think they'd be worth having a try and just seeing how it feels for a couple of weeks if that makes the pain a little bit better.